In section 1.3, problem number 29, we're asked to find the value of the six trig functions given this point, 7.5 comma negative 7.5, if the on the terminal side of the angle theta. So I'm just going to draw an axis here to kind of get an image of what that looks like. So theta, let's find P first. So the point P is positive 7.5 and then negative 7.5. So it's about the same distance from the origin in both directions, x and y. And that point is 7.5, negative 7.5. So this is the terminal side of that angle. So that angle theta is this guy. And then this is kind of that right triangle. That gives us those trig functions. So this is our y, this is our x, and r. So r, actually before we get into that r, let's remember what the trig functions are. So there's sine, cosine, and tangent. And their reciprocals are cosecant, secant, and cotan. Sine is going to be y over r, so cosecant is the reciprocal of that. Cosine is x over r, so secant is the reciprocal of that. And tangent is y over x. So cotangent is the reciprocal of that. Whoops. Okay, so remembering those functions reminds me why I need to find this r. So I have y as that negative 7.5, and I have x as 7.5, but I still need r. So I can remember that r is the square root of x squared plus y squared. And if I forget that, I can always look at that Pythagorean theorem and make that right triangle that I can see up there in that picture. Okay, so let's plug in the numbers here. So x is 7.5. We want that squared, and y is negative 7.5. We want that squared. And when I square the negative, it becomes positive because negative times a negative is a positive. So I can just write this as 7.5 squared plus 7.5 squared. Now I have the same thing added together twice, which is repeated addition, so that's I can change that to multiplication. So I have 2 times 7.5 squared. And now that I have multiplication, I can start thinking about if something comes out of the square root sign. So 7.5 is squared, and that cancels with the square root sign for the 7.5. We're still going to have the 2 under the square root, but for the 7.5, I can bring that out in front. So I get 7.5 times the square root of 2 for r. So this is r, and I have my x as 7.5, and my y is negative 7.5. I'm actually not going to box that since that's not the answer, but it is going to help me, so just kind of draw a light circle around it. Okay, so now I'm going to go back over here and figure out sine, cosine, and tangent. And at this point, it's really kind of plug and chug. So I have r, x, and y, and I just need to put them into the formulas for sine, cosine, tangent, cosecant, secant, and cotangent. So I've color-coded them here so I can kind of see where everything goes. So I'm going to start with sine. I'm going to grab my pen here. And I can see, I guess I'll stick with blue. The y is going to be the negative 7.5. And r is going to be 7.5 over times radical 2. That's the purple. And then my 7.5s will cancel. And I'm left with, I still have that negative there, so I have a negative 1 over radical 2. And I could rationalize that and say negative radical 2 over 2. And then the cosecant is really just the inverse of that. So I've already done the hard part of the plugging and simplifying. So I can just flip those fractions over. So this is going to be negative radical 2 over 1, which simplifies to negative radical 2. And then moving on to cosine. So let's start with an equal sign here and get our green x. So x is 7.5, positive 7.5 this time, and r is 7.5 over radical 2, and you can see the same thing kind of happening here. And when I simplify these, the 7.5's cancel. This time they're both positive, so my final answer is going to be positive. And I get a 1 over radical 2, or if I rationalize that, I'll get a radical 2 over 2. And my secant, I'm just going to take the inverse, the multiplicative inverse, which means take the reciprocal. So that's radical 2 over 1, which comes out to radical 2. Okay, and then tangent. So I'm going to grab, do an equal sign first. The orange pen for the y is the negative 7.5, and the x is positive 7.5. Well, these cancel again, and I'm left with just negative 1 over 1, which is 1. And of course, the reciprocal of 1 is again 1. So both tangent and cotangent are 1. And there's my final answers. Let's just put a box around just the answer part. You know, I think that let's go ahead and use the rationalized form for all of these. So there's my 6 trig functions.